Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, thumma amma ba'd. To proceed, we'll resume inshallah our Saturday classes here and after an interruption for 1 week. And today we will talk about al-Barq, the station of al-Barq, from Manaazil As-Saa'ireen, a book written by Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah, who died in the year 481 after Hijrah. And we are this is station number 69, so we are in the section of al-Ahwal, qism al-Ahwal, the qism or the section of the states, the inner spiritual states. And then we will have qism al-Walayat or Walayat, and the next one will be qism al-Walayat, comes from Walaya, which is to have intimate friendship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and followed by qism al-Haqa'iq, or that section on the truth. And that is going to be from 81 to 90, from the 81st station to the 90th station, and then qism al-Nihayat, or the qism or the section of endings, and that's basically the endings of the journey. That's the last 10 stations in the journey. And as we said before, these stations do overlap. We cannot ever say that al-Mahabba is not one of the final and highest stations. We cannot ever say that al-Ihsan is not the highest station. In a sense, al-Ihsan was said by the Prophet ﷺ to be the highest stations. So there is certainly overlap between these different stations, and you don't leave a station to get into another one. Last time we talked about mystification, the station of al-Hayaman, or mystification, and we said that some of the stations that the Shaykh mentioned are not necessarily integral parts of the journey. They're incidental occurrences. Some may experience them, some may not experience them. They're not required in and of themselves, but they may be encountered on the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qism al-Ahwal, the section on the states that we are on now, starts with al-Mahabba, which is station 61. Love, the love of the divine, love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is station 61. The last one that we covered, or the last two that we covered that were somewhat related to each other, were the stations of station of al-Hayaman is mystification, was the last one that we covered. And prior to this was the station of bewilderment, and we said bewilderment and Hayaman are pretty sort of connected, interrelated. And now we will cover the station of lightning. The station of lightning, the station of al-Barq, lightning. And you may wonder, about the name, but we will talk about the significance of the name and how relevant it is to the concept that the Shaykh will set out to explain. Concept that the Shaykh will set out to explain. First, the Shaykh starts with an ayah from the Quran, and here he started with قول الله عز وجل قال الله عز وجل إذ رأى نارا. The Shaykh said قال الله عز وجل إذ رأى نارا. Allah the Almighty said when he saw a fire. When he saw a fire. Someone may say fire is related to lightning, but this is not this superficial. It's not just about light and light, the sort of the fire and light. It's a little bit deeper than this. When Moses alayhi salam was on his way back from Madian to Egypt, he saw that lightning, that fire. He saw a fire at a distance, and then he went to it, and then that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to him. That ushered his prophethood, that signaled the beginning of his prophethood. The Shaykh wants to say that the beginning of al-Walaya, which will come in two stations, that the beginning of al-walaya is ushered by or is inducted by, signaled by al-barq, lightning. And then he will explain this. So just as much as that the prophethood of Musa was signaled by him seeing the fire, when you see the lightning, then you could be on your way to al-walaya, intimate friendship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we come to the station of walaya, we will try to demystify al-walaya. ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون. Most certainly the friends of Allah, the intimate friends of Allah, the awliya of Allah, at times translated as saints. I prefer not to use these translations because of the negative connotations that could be linked with them. But awliya are the intimate friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. There will be no grievance for them. There is no fear for them, nor grievance, nor should they grieve. الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the awliya as those who believed and were conscious of God. Yet taqwa, to be conscious of God, God consciousness, piety, God consciousness. So that's basically what al-walaya is. And every Muslim has a degree of walaya. Everyone who submitted, everyone who said La ilaha illallah, the greatest word ever, the greatest statement ever that you could say, everyone who said La ilaha illallah has a degree of walaya, but certainly people vary in their walaya. And there are wide differences between people in their walaya. Yet it is all about iman and piety. It's all about faith and consciousness of God. But we'll come to talk about this, inshallah. But that's what the Shaykh meant when he mentioned this particular verse, إِذْ رَأَى نَارًا, when he saw a fire. He meant to say that at the induction of this phase of al-walaya, or this part of the journey, there is some transformative experience that will induct you into this phase of the journey. Then the Shaykh said, البرق باكورة تلمع للعبد فتدعوه إلى الدخول في هذا الطريق. البرق باكورة تلمع للعبد فتدعوه إلى الدخول في هذا الطريق. Barq, which is lightning, is an initial spark. Bakura is the initial, sort of the initiation of something, the initial event, whatever it is. But here it is an initial spark. Bakura, talma'u lil-abd. I did not translate talma', glows, for the servant, because a spark it's understood from. It's an initial spark. تلمع للعبد فتدعوه إلى الدخول في هذا الطريق, that invites the servant to set out on this road. It's an initial spark that invites the servant to set out on this road. Okay, what does that mean? It means that it is something that you see, something that you experience, something that you witness, a transformative experience, a transformative spiritual experience that you encounter at one point of your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will make you choose the path of al-walaya, which is not sort of the ordinary work that everyone is doing. It is when you set out on the path of complete dedication, complete devotion. When you have dedicated your life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, devoted your life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, chosen Allah as not only your one Rabb and one Lord, but your ultimate and basically, in a sense, only friend, only ally, in a sense, which does not mean that you will not be friends with others. But when we come to the third phase, we will explain what this means. Okay, So this is a transformative experience. And the reason why it was called lightning, and the concept itself, you want to sort of figure out, understand where the concept is coming from. The reason why it was called lightning, and he will talk about it as the initiation, that experience, that transformative experience that will invite you to enter the path, to come in, to walk in, to take the first step on this special path of al-walaya, or intimate friendship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he will say, because remember in Qism al-Ahwal also we talked about al-wajd. Al-wajd is to wajada, to find. Ecstasy is what it means. We said intense spiritual experience. Intense spiritual experience. That's our definition of wajd. That you find, that you encounter. That is not basically invoked, and it is not earned. It is granted. You capture it. You catch it. So what is the difference between al-wajd and al-barq? Intense experience, intense experience. What's the difference? The Shaykh said, والفرق بينه وبين الوجد أن الوجد يقع بعد الدخول فيه يعني في الطريق والبرق قبله فالوجد زاد والبرق إذن. And the difference between it and the wajd or ecstasy, which is the common translation, although it's not always about ecstasy, sometimes it could be fear, because but anyway, that's the common translation of wajd. The difference between it and wajd ecstasy is that wajd occurs after embarking on the path, while barq occurs before it. Thus wajd is a sustenance, is a boost, and barq is a permission. Barq is an invitation. And then he said, وَهُوَ عَلَى ثَلَاثِ دَرَجَاتٍ, and it is of 3 levels. So, like I said, intense spiritual experience. The difference between it and wajd is that wajd, after you have already come on the path, you experience something, you encounter those intense spiritual experiences. But barq is an intense spiritual experience that invites you to embark on the path or set out on the path. It's an invitation. But it's called barq, it's called lightning, because it could be very brief. Could be very brief. Could be very transient. But at the same time, it's called lightning to infer what? Intensity. Intensity. As if you do need to be shaken, as if you have so many darknesses surrounding you that whatever will pierce through those darknesses needs to be as intense as barq. See the clouds in the sky and how the barq pierces through the clouds in the sky. So the relationship here between this and the intense spiritual experience is that we are surrounded by so many layers of darkness, aren't we? And without acknowledging that, we can never set out on this path. Without acknowledging that I am drowning in darknesses, caused by so many things, most prominently egoism, most prominently my self-consciousness versus God consciousness, self-centricity versus God centricity. And then this ego blinds you, that blocks your sight from so many things. And that ego is not just simply your ego that is full of lusts and greeds. It's also full of biases. And those biases are not only your personal biases, they're also your communal, societal, social, sort of the biases that you earned from your surroundings. So once you have realized that I'm so surrounded, then you could be on your way to dissipating those darknesses. But then you get an invitation, transformative experience, a lightning that will pierce through the clouds, that will pierce through the darknesses, and could be very brief. Glimpse of light. Glimpse of light. But then the cost of ignoring those signs, and I don't want you to be paranoid, because I want you to trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to always trust that you could always go back to Him. He's oft returning. He's a tawwab. He always comes back to you when you go back to Him. But this is just for warning, so that we're more vigilant. There could be a severe punishment for people who ignore the signals of Allah, the cues, the light. There could be severe punishment. Do you know what's the worst punishment? You don't receive any more. The worst punishment is that the lightning will be withheld. You will not receive any more. You will not get any more. And that's what was mentioned in Surah Al-An'am. وَنُقَلِّبُ أَفْئِدَتَهُمْ وَأَبْصَارَهُمْ كَمَا لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهِ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَنَذَرُهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. What does this mean? It means we turn away their hearts and their sights, their eyes. Turn away their hearts and their eyes. كَمَا لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهِ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. For they have not believed in it the first time, because they've ignored it the first time. We sent them a signal. We, illuminated their way. We sent them the light. They did not walk. They ignored it. They stayed back. They refused to walk. What is it? Lust, greed, bias, arrogance? They just did not want to walk. So that's it. We would not send them any more light. كَمَا لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَا وَلَا مَرَّةٍ. For they have not believed in it the first time. وَنَذَرُهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. And we will lead them on in their insolence, wandering blindly. We will lead them on in their insolence, wandering blindly. This is the Arbery translation, and it's pretty nice. So كما لم يؤمنوا به أول مرة نذرهم في طغيانهم يعمهون. Abu Darda radiallahu anhu, being one of the best companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and one of the most vigilant sort of companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on his deathbed, Abu Darda radiallahu anhu was repeating this verse so many times because Abu Darda was afraid that it is very possible that his heart was turned away. How could you? I mean, you are Abu Darda. You've been praying. Yes. He was afraid that possibly at one point I did something. I ignored, the signals that were sent to me. I chose misguidance over guidance at one point because of my greed, my lust, my bias, and my heart was turned away. And certainly I should be anxious about it, because if your heart is turned, the problem is when your heart is turned away, you just can't figure out what's wrong about you. You will be that person that Allah described when He said, أَفَمَنْ زُيِّنَ لَهُ سُوءُ عَمَلِهِ فَرَآهُ حَسَنًا. أَفَمَنْ زُيِّنَ لَهُ سُوءُ عَمَلِهِ فَرَآهُ حَسَنًا. Behold, I give the parable of the one whose bad deeds have been beautified, whose evil deeds have been beautified for him. to the point where they see them as good, or they see his evil as good. And that's the problem. The problem is when you're deprived of guidance, it's not how much work, it's not how much learning, it's not how much effort. It's just that you are wandering around blindly. And if you have been blinded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter how much work or effort or learning, you'd be doomed. So the way out of this is what we will talk about at the end, which is iftiqar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to show more and more brokenness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to show more and more faqr, more and more need to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because yes, it is very possible that many times you have favored misguidance over guidance. It is very possible that many times you have intently, determinedly made the wrong choice, wanting the wrong choice because of your greed or your bias. Many decisions we make in our lives, many decisions we make in our lives, from where we live to who we marry, it's so many decisions we make in our lives that we may have chosen misguidance over guidance and ignored the signals from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the only thing that you can do really is to show more brokenness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He would basically send you another invitation, send you another invitation to embark on the path to Him, and to change your direction, because muqallib, that means turn away. If you're turned away, then no matter how much effort, it doesn't matter. You're already walking in the wrong direction. It takes you farther from your desirable destination. Okay, so then the Shaykh starts to talk about the 3 degrees of al-barq. And he says, الدرجة الأولى برق يلمع من جانب العدا في عين الرجاء. العدا من الوعد. عدا means like وعد. عين الرجاء is known. So الدرجة الأولى برق يلمع من جانب العدا في عين الرجاء. The first level is a lightning that glows from the promises for the hopeful, thereby the servant. فيستكثر فيه العبد القليل من العطاء, finds little grants plentiful. ويستقل فيه الكثير من الأعباء, and finds large burdens light. ويستحلي فيه مرارة القضاء, and finds sour destinies sweet. So basically the hopeful, عين الرجاء, the person who looks with the eye of hope. فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. Some consider this to be the most concise mau'izah that you could give, because oftentimes we know what this salih is and we just ignore it. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ, who looks forward to the meeting with his Lord, فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا, let him do good and associate no partners in his worship of his Lord. But the Shaykh here is talking about the diligent who's hopeful, the diligent who's motivated by the promises, the Jannah, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, working hard. And when he's working hard, he's also aware that all of his work is nothing. And the burdens are so light, so large burdens are light. Pay 2.5% of your savings light, very light. Pray 5 times, light, it was fast. Don't drink wine, not only light, but it saves you. And so the burdens are light, and finds little grants plentiful. And the grants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are great and plentiful. Most of us have have this reversed, like the other way around. So the grants are little, and the burdens are heavy for most of us. Now this is the diligent servant, hopeful, يرجو لقاء ربه. And then sour destinies, he finds them sweet, because they get him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now he could exercise patience, he can exercise sabr and even shukr in these times of hardship. They get him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nearer to him. They make his heart more tender, or her heart more tender. And then he says, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ بَرْقٌ يَلْمَعُ مِنْ جَانِبِ الْوَعِيدِ, this time, فِي عَيْنِ الْحَذَرِ. The second level is a lightning that sparks from the threats for the vigilant. Thereby the servant فَيَسْتَقْصِرُ فِيهِ الْعَبْدُ الطَّوِيلَ مِنَ الْأَمَلِ, finds all hopes short. وَيَزْهَدُ فِي الْخَلْقِ عَلَى الْقُرْبِ, grows disinterested in people despite their closeness. وَيَرْغَبُ فِي تَطْهِيرِ السِّرِّ, and desires to purify the innermost self. So the first one was the diligent, the second one is the vigilant. First one is the hardworking, abd, the servant, is working hard. Also watchful of his work, also sincere. But this one is so vigilant, so concerned, has this ishfaq, has this concern. He sees death approaching all the time, that he has, all hopes are short now. He sees the eminence of that meeting. It's so eminent that his meeting with his Lord is so eminent, and when you feel it is so eminent, it just changes your life. And then he said, وَيَزْهَدُ فِي الْخَلْقِ عَلَى الْقُرْبِ, and then grows disinterested in people despite their closeness. And that does not mean that he will be aloof, he will be discourteous, he will be inconsiderate of people. Absolutely not. It is actually when you become disinterested in them is when you become most interested in them. How is that? If you become disinterested in them for themselves, you become most interested in them for their Lord, for your Lord. After all, they are His creations. They are His creatures. After all, you have so many obligations towards them. They are the creations of your Lord. They are the honored creations of your Lord. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the children of Adam. So once you have lost hope, in anything that comes from them, you don't need them. That is how you become disinterested in them. Then you become most interested in kindness and being kind to them, dutiful towards them. Living up to your obligations, living up to Allah's expectation of you, or Allah's demand of you concerning His creations that He honored and that He is most merciful to. So, and this then becomes unconditional, with no contingencies. Unconditional with no contingencies. Every love is conditional, except the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It becomes unconditional. Love your parents. You love your parents more when they're doing good things. They're helping you out. They're, assisting you. But then when your parents get older, And instead of driving you around, you drive them around, take them to the hospital, take them to the doctor's appointments, so on. You have to take time off. That love that was for your parents, even if the love did not diminish, I think it would diminish. Because ultimately the translation of love is basically, ultimately, love is not just like an abstract universe that's out there. It's about how you react, how you behave. It's about your conduct. But it will diminish. You'll start to feel it's a little bit of a burden, particularly when they become sick. And then they become senile. And then sometimes they start to not make a lot of sense. And they say things that are not very sensible. And then they could live for 20 years like this. And for 20 years, you'll have to be doing things for them and working hard, taking time off, taking time from your family. Fun things that you like to do. People who like to go to the gym. I can't go because I have to take my this or that parent to the doctor's appointment. So all love is conditional. A lot of contingencies. It becomes pure, it becomes unconditional when it is really for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if it is rooted in your devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it does not fade out, regardless of circumstances. And it does not mean that we're not going to be human beings. And certainly, so sometimes you even have this. You feel the burden of when you have obligations. You feel. But I'm not saying that we're not going to be human beings. We will continue to be human beings. But when this love is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will put things in perspective, and it will give us the energy to continue to be committed, to continue to be dutiful, to continue to be loving and compassionate towards our loved ones. And then the Shaykh said, وَيَرْغَبُ فِي تَطْهِيرِ السِّرِّ, and desires to purify the innermost self. So this is the vigilant now versus the diligent. The diligent was doing a lot of good work, but the vigilant is starting now to purify the innermost self. Starting now to pay attention to every move, every statement, and to suspect himself, and to be critical of himself, and to be critical of his or her motives and intents. And then the Shaykh said, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّالِثَةُ بَرْقٌ يَلْمَعُ مِنْ جَانِبِ اللُّطْفِ فِي عَيْنِ الْإِفْتِقَارِ. The third level is a lightning that glows from the kindness, lutf, kindness, for the broken thereby. Iftiqar is the verb and noun from faqr. It is when you have need and you show this need to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is about poverty. Faqr is poverty. Iftiqar is from faqr. It is basically when you have this experience of poverty. Experience poverty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything. So then this type of brokenness, this type of lightning that glows from the kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who are broken, in need of Him, thereby فَيُنْشِئُ سَحَابَ السُّرُورِ, generating clouds of joy. Generating clouds of joy. وَيُمْطِرُ قَطْرَ الطَّرَبِ, bringing down showers of euphoria. Bringing down showers of euphoria. وَيُجْرِي نَهَرَ الْإِفْتِخَارِ, and causing the rivers of pride to flow. Causing the rivers of pride to flow. The rivers of pride. So this is someone, and this is basically when the person comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala counting on nothing. It's not diligence, it's not vigilance, counting on nothing. Counting nothing as an asset, credit, except his poverty or her poverty. That's the only thing I own. That's the only thing I present to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my acknowledgement of my poverty, my needs, my brokenness. Then once you start to receive the sort of the installments of kindness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will have those clouds of joy that will bring down showers of euphoria, and that will cause the rivers of pride to flow. Now, just a little bit about this idea of iftikhar, because it is related to al-Izza al-Imaniyya, iftikhar, pride. It's related to al-Izza al-Imaniyya, which is Iman-based pride, the pride that is produced from Iman. The feeling of contentment, the feeling of fulfillment that the believer has, that prevents the believer from humiliating themselves, prevents the believer from humiliating themselves, and makes them feel full, satisfied, gratified, and they don't humiliate themselves because they don't need anything of anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except their Lord Azza wa Jal. Okay. That concept of iftikhar and that concept of fakhr, in and of itself, you have to understand that maybe we don't even need to talk about that concept among ourselves until we get to that phase of iftikhar, because this is the iftikhar of iftikhar. Have we reached the phase of iftikhar, brokenness, to have that izzah, to have that sort of might, that pride, to deserve to have it? No, because if the iftikhar usually is negative, it's forbidden, it's prohibited. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah awha ilayya an tawada'u hatta la yabghi ahadun ala ahad wa la yafkhara ahadun ala ahad." Allah had revealed to me, had inspired me that you should humble yourselves until no one shows aggressions towards anyone, until no one is disdainful or boastful towards anyone, or no one shows aggression toward anyone or boasts to anyone. So that boasting, iftikhar means boasting to some extent, and so that boasting is prohibited. But it has to be a different type of boasting here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in many verses, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ مُخْتَالًا فَخُورًا. Allah does not love those who are self-deluded and boastful. Allah does not love those who are self-deluded or boastful. Allah does not love anyone who is self-deluded and boastful. So we should stay away from boastfulness. But this is the boastfulness of the broken, just that will prevent him from, humiliating themselves, humiliating their deen, being hypocritical, compromising when they should not compromise, will never make them discourteous, will never make them haughty, will never make them arrogant with anyone. They're not haughty, they're not arrogant, they're not discourteous. So the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, it's reported by Sunan Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, and reported by many, from Jabir ibn Atiq radiallahu anhu, he said, إن من الغيرة ما يحبه الله ومن الغيرة إن من الغيرة ما يحب الله ومن الغيرة ما يبغض الله ومن الخيلاء ما يحب الله ومنها ما يبغض الله. فأما الغيرة التي يحب الله فالغيرة في الريبة، وأما الغيرة التي يبغض الله فالغيرة في غير الريبة. وأما الخيلاء التي يحب الله فاغتيال الرجل نفسه عند القتال واغتياله في الصدقة، وأما الخيلاء الذي يبغض الله فاغتياله في الفخر والبغي. So the Prophet ﷺ said that, you know, pride, there is jealousy that Allah loves and jealousy that Allah hates, and there is pride that Allah loves and pride that Allah hates. As for the jealousy that Allah loves, it is the jealousy that is warranted when there is reasonable suspicion, riba, reasonable suspicion. And as for the jealousy that Allah hates, is the jealousy that's unwarranted when there is no reasonable suspicion. And as for the pride that Allah loves, it is the pride in jihad, in fighting the enemy, and the pride, you know, إنها لمشية يبغضها الله إلا في هذا الموطن. It's this walk is a walk that Allah hates, except in this particular position, particular situation of walking between the two lines in the battlefield, and the person's pride at the time of sadaqah. How could you be proud when you give sadaqah? And then the Prophet ﷺ said, and as for the pride that Allah hates, it is the pride in baghi, in aggression and fakhr, boasting. Well, what is this khuyala that Allah loves? When you confront the enemy, when you're in the battlefield, or sadaqah, when you confront your enemy, it's understandable. But in sadaqah, how is it? Well, the scholars found this to be a little bit difficult to sort of understand, because actually, when you are given sadaqah, you should really be so humble, because you want to avoid man and adha, you want to avoid those qualities harming the recipient of sadaqah by showing humbleness, by showing humility when you give sadaqah. And some of the righteous predecessors used to give sadaqah like this, not like this. You know, so that their hand is the lower when they give it. So some of the scholars said that this is the pride that the recipient would have, so that they don't humiliate themselves. So if you're receiving sadaqah, you don't act like you're sort of so poor and destitute. You try to show that you're not. You try to have dignity and not ask. And when you're given, you don't show your destituteness to get more. You show that you're good. I'm fine. I'm good. And that's what the Prophet meant, according to those scholars. But many times it's hard to reconcile between this and the wording of certain reports. And it's clear that the Prophet ﷺ meant that the person that was given sadaqah will have this khuyala. And so some of the scholars said that this is understandable, because sadaqah is like a war with the shaitan. It's battle, ma tuhib. It is to give up that which you love the most ardently cherish, your money, your wealth. And you have to boast to the shaitan. The shaitan tells you, no, you're not up to this. You just can't do that. And you tell the shaitan, I am up to it. I am greater. I am better than this. I'm better than being miserly. I'm better than skipping this opportunity. And then you almost, you know how we emulate the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You know that aside from the attributes that are only befitting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like al-Mutakabbir, al-Jabbar, the compiler, and the proud, and so on, we are meant to model ourselves on those attributes, after the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are meant to imbibe those attributes. لقد جاءكم رسول من أنفسكم عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم. There had come to you a messenger from among yourselves. عزيز عليه ما عنتم. You know, he grieves over your suffering. حريص عليكم. He's keen, you know, he's keen on your benefit or your interest. بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم. He is kind and merciful towards the believers. Ra'uf, Rahim are two attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah said that the Prophet ﷺ has those attributes. Certainly not in the divine way, not to the divine extent, but yes, you imbibe those attributes. And then you emulate them to model yourself after the ultimate good, pursuing the ultimate good. The ultimate good is God, and His attributes are the manifestations of this goodness, all of His attributes. So aside from the attributes that are befitting of the divine only, the majestic, mighty attributes that are befitting of the divine only, you want to do this. You want to copy as much as you can from the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you boast to the shaitan. You boast to the shaitan. I am the one that Allah breathed His soul into me. You know, you don't know me. I am much greater than this. You can't do this. You can't sort of like pull off this trick on me. I am greater than this. That's boasting. Boasting to the shaitan. Boasting to the shaitan during this time. And to overpower your weak self as well, your nafs. So this is khuyala and the sadaqah. Keep in mind, sometimes we do think that because it is related, because we talked about khuyala fil harb. Some people have the completely sort of mistaken concept about this, is that when you deal with an unbeliever, you always have to deal with might. You translate izza as might, and you take it out of context, and then you have your understanding of might, and then you end up being stern, rude, discourteous. And is that anywhere conducive, in any way, shape or form, conducive to good da'wah, to leaving a good impression? So أذلة على المؤمنين أعزة على الكافرين, which means humble towards the believers and then mightily proud towards the unbelievers. Read the before and after, the context. This is the context of tilting towards the unbelievers, of leaving your religion. That's why the verse starts يا الذين آمنوا ما يرتد منكم عن دينه فسوف يأتي الله بقوم يحبهم ويحبونه وأذلة على المؤمنين أعزة على الكافرين. So all you believe, those of you who turn away from their deen, that's the context. But if you want to figure out how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with the unbelievers, then you read how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with the unbelievers. And you understand that the Prophet ﷺ never held equal someone like Suhail ibn Amr and someone like Ubay ibn Khalaf, someone like, al-Mut'im ibn Adi, with whom the Prophet ﷺ showed reciprocity, and even after Badr he said, had al-Mut'im ibn Adi been alive, because al-Mut'im allowed him into Mecca, gave him jawar, protected him when he came back from Ta'if, had al-Mut'im ibn Adi been alive, I would have released all those captives if he just asked me. So just one word from al-Mut'im, I would have released all those captives. After all of what they have done to the Muslims and the oppression and the killing and everything they have done to the Muslims, I would reciprocate with that kindness with Mut'im. And Mut'im, had he been alive and he asked me to release them, I would have released them. So when Adi ibn Hatim came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was Christian, and he had the cross on him and everything, and Adi ibn Hatim, and it's a long story, but it's a beautiful story. Ibn Ishaq and others reported this. But one of the things that made Adi ibn Hatim realize, that one of the things that made Adi ibn Hatim convert, two things. First thing is that the Prophet ﷺ kept on telling him things about him. Don't you do this, don't you do that, things that he only knows. And then he said, فَعَلِمْتُ أَنَّهُ يَعْلَمُ مَا يَجْهَلُ. He said, I then realized that he knows what he does not know. It's paradoxical. يَعْلَمْ مَا يَجْهَلُ, knows that which he knows not. Meaning that he knows that which he has no access to. He has no capacity to know. How could he know this? So once I have realized that he knows that which he is not supposed to know, then I figure that this is a different man. And then, but what really tilted him to conversion was not that, but that the Prophet ﷺ, or maybe partially that also, but then his sister said to him, go, he's either a prophet or a king. If he's a prophet, you do this. If he's a king, you do that. But don't miss out on meeting him. He's either a prophet or a king. And then, so the Prophet ﷺ spread out his rida for Adi ibn Hatim. He spread out his garment for Adi ibn Hatim to sit on it. And then the Prophet sat on the floor. Because Adi ibn Hatim is the son of Hatim al-Ta'i, they're wealthy, they're well off. The Prophet ﷺ had this, very humble, very modest room. So Adi was not expectant, certainly. And in some reports, it's wisada, it's like a cushion, like something cushiony that he spread out for him, or he handed him to sit on. And then the Prophet ﷺ sat on the floor. So Adi ibn Hatim said, and at that time I recognized that he's not a king. And I recognize that he is a prophet. Someone who has all of this, influence on his people, someone who knows that which he's not supposed to do, but at the same time, someone who's this humble, this courteous. This is not the behavior of kings. A king would not, at least he would let you sit down close by. He would let you sit down on a sort of a similar seat, or in a similar seat, but he would not give you their garment to sit on and they sit on the ground. So this is how we give da'wah to people. This is basically how you deal with people to earn. And certainly that does not mean that sometimes, being having dignity, you always have dignity. This act of the Prophet ﷺ, this conduct is not undignified, it's most dignified. It's courteous, it's kind, it's compassionate. He has concern for Adi ibn Hatim. He wants what's best for Adi ibn Hatim. He doesn't need Adi ibn Hatim. He was much, at the time, Adi was coming to him. Because the Prophet ﷺ had control over most of Arabia. Adi was coming to him. His sister told him, this is either a prophet or a king. You go to him. So this is not an act, it's not undignified in any way, it's most dignified. So the bottom line is, dignity that does not mean discourtesy. Many times when, the mayor or someone from like higher up in the FBI or something comes to the masjid, and then you see people are sort of like not knowing how to behave now. So some people humiliate themselves, and you figure that when you do this, you just like you act a little too cheap, like a little too just sort of hypocritical. When you do that, you figure out that this must not be for Allah. This is not iftikhar liftiqar. And some people are stern to show their izzah imaniyya. And those people are misguided also. Because it is about time of showing courtesy. because these people are not coming, are not coming sort of like Abu Jahl. They're not talking to you like Abu Jahl would have been talking to the Prophet ﷺ. Even when Abu Jahl talked to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ outdid him in forbearance and patience. But anyway, but you have to figure out the difference between this and that. And you have to have the proper motives. And if you have the proper motive, that's the most important part. That is the thing that will fine-tune, adjust your conduct, where it is not out of humiliation and hypocrisy and need for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is not at the same time rude, stern, discourteous, repulsive. You will be just right. It would be iftikhar liftiqar, the pride of the broken, the pride of the person who has need for Allah. And in this case, this mayor could even be the president. You will treat them as your poor creatures of your Lord that were honored by Him. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Honor the children of Adam. These are the descendants of your father, Adam. These are human beings that are suffering like you suffer. This person could be, the secretary of this or the president of that. He could just go home, and have like an argument with his wife and have a bad day for the rest of the day. He's just like a poor human being that has the same experiences and suffering like you. This person could be, the sort of the secretary of Homeland Security or something, and receive a phone call from his doctor tomorrow. Your colonoscopy shows that you have stage 3 cancer. Right or wrong? Can get a viral thing, a viral infection that just, poor human beings struggling. They're the children of your father Adam. They're the creatures of your Lord. You're being compassionate towards them, but not in not in a way where you humiliate yourself or you humiliate your deed. You will only do this if you have some self-interest. But if you're being compassionate and kind and extending and polite because of your sort of God-centric motives, you will never go wrong. You will always be right. You will always be fine-tuned to the golden mean, the proper behavior, the proper conduct. You will say the proper things because your motive is the proper motive. Your motive is the best motive, which will manifest in your behavior. So that's iftikhar al-iftiqar. When do we need to talk about this? After we have that brokenness of the believer, then you will have the pride of the believer. But to have the pride without the brokenness could be very detrimental to yourself and to the cause of Islam. قولوا قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.